Welcome to In the Green, the podcast based on the intersection between life, finance, and the pursuit of breaking par. I am your host, Ryan Briggs with GFG Wealth Advisors. Time to tee off. Welcome back to another episode of In the Green podcast. We are at the Traditions Club today, our usual home. Last episode we departed to Whispering Pines, but we are back in our usual establishment today. We are joined with a very special guest, Chief Investment Officer of RFG Advisory, Rick Wedell. Rick, thanks for coming, my friend.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Rick has graciously given me some of his time. He literally landed, 20?
About 20 minutes ago, yes.
And buggied over here, so I really appreciate you carving out some time for us.
You're very, very welcome.
Awesome. I want to, since you are so involved in what we do day to day, I would like to help the listener understand how that came to be. So can you give us a little bit of your background, how you moved into the financial industry, and then how you wound up at RFG?
Sure. And this is a long story, so I will endeavor to make it smaller.
Sure.
But I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, which is relevant to the story. And then around about the age of 18, I got into Harvard, and I decided, I would go to school in Boston, and I was sort of like, I'm out of here. I'll never be back in Birmingham again.
Yeah. See you later.
See you later. Peace out. And then, went through 4 years of school. Like any great story, there's a girl involved. So I was dating a young woman as I was graduating college. She wanted to go to med school in Boston. And so I took a job in Boston to kind of be near her. And then we broke up about 3 months after graduation, but at that point you have the job, so you can't leave.
Yeah.
And the job that I had taken was with a firm by the name of Bain Capital, actually Bain Capital Credit. It was the fixed income affiliate of that investment arm. A lot of people know that as Mitt Romney's firm. By the time I got there, Mittens, as he was affectionately known, had kind of moved on to bigger and better things.
I've never heard that.
So he had kind of moved on, but I spent the next decade plus at Bain, sort of investing. By the time of my departure, I was the head of fixed income consumer investing and an assistant portfolio manager on about an $8 billion CLO portfolio. So had just sort of risen through the ranks. Along the way, they sent me to Stanford to go to business school, and I came back and had gotten my MBA and all that kind of fun stuff.
Not a bad departure over to California.
No.
Just head over there real quick, get educated, come back.
And if anything, like if there are decisions that I can be criticized for in my life, it might have been the decision to move back to Boston after being out in California, but who knows? We never get to see the other side of that decision. But anyway, long story short, it was a great ride. Really enjoyed my time there, but it is a grueling life. You work 70, 80, 90 hours a week, and I got to the point where I had 3 young kids, and was commuting an hour each way into the city, and just decided that this life was not where I wanted to be for the rest of my career.
Sure.
And
honing in on the work-life balance.
Yeah, trying to hone in.
It's a buzzword nowadays, but I'm sure back, when you were making this decision, it necessarily wasn't the hot topic, right?
True, and you don't realize how fast that rat reel spins, or that rat race is, until you step off it.
Right.
So anyway, I stepped away and started looking around at different careers or different paths that I could go on, and I found RFG. And was introduced to Shannon and Bobby, and Shannon and Bobby had this vision, who are my partners in RFG. They had this vision for building the investment firm of the future, and what would that look like for clients? What would that look like for the advisors that we would serve? And part of that was bringing institutional investment management to retail investors. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means, but basically, the idea is to manage money for sort of mom and pop in the same way that we would manage money for, a $500 million endowment, or in the same way that very wealthy individuals manage their money. Bring those same principles down to that level. And that's what I was brought in to do. And, we came in, I inherited about a $200 million portfolio, over the course of the past couple of years. We have grown that to a $1.5 billion portfolio.
That's phenomenal.
Along the way, I think we've helped a ton of people. That's where we are today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for filling in your background and let us know who you are. In a previous episode where I introduced Mark to the audience, we broke down a little bit of our relationship of GFG with RFG. Just to remind the audience, or if you missed the episode, how this works is RFG, they've put together a platform to assist independent advisors so that we can compete with anybody else out there in the market. So that is your goal, and I would say you guys do a phenomenal job of it. So thank you for all the hard work that you do. The entire team at RFG makes our life so much easier. Really does.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you.
And I know that's your goal, and you guys are doing a great job, so thank you for it. So how does your specific role as the Chief Investment Officer at RFG affect the individual client with GFG Wealth Advisors?
Yeah, absolutely. We manage portfolios on behalf of the clients that you guys serve. And we really do that in a couple of ways. The first is, once again, bringing that sort of institutional investment experience down to the retail client level. So thinking about how to manage money. You get a lot of our competitors out there that might be a little gimmicky, right? And might be doing some things that maybe sound good in a marketing brochure, but when you actually play them out, don't actually work all that well. And so we endeavor to bring, the same way that, let's say, the Harvard Endowment or a very wealthy family or whatever might invest for income production, for generational wealth management, for all of these different things. We basically bring that down to the retail client level and manage it sort of at scale for our clients. And that's really my role in part. The other part of my role is to be a resource for all of the clients that are on the platform to the extent that they have questions about what's going on in the market, or why is my investment portfolio built like this, or maybe they see a trade and they're questioning, why did you do that, or what are you seeing, or this and that and the other. Like, people have questions. And what I find to be very interesting about this role is that we've always said from day one, there's no such thing as an ivory tower at RFG, right? Like, if you want to get in touch with me, if you want to give me a call, call me, right? Like, reach out to the advisor will get in touch with me, or you can reach out to me directly. That's fine too. And we'll get on the phone and we'll chit chat, whatever the market trend is, this and that. We do a lot of, client facing communication as well, to just sort of communicate and be that arm of the firm, that if a client has a question about their investments, I want to get that question answered. It is your money. You should know the people that invest it for you. And I just want to be clear, I do mean this. We had a client.
You really do.
We had a client who, a couple of years ago, he was a DIYer for most of his career, but he got to a point where he started to get worried about cognitive decline, like memory decline. And in fact, if you met him, you would say, like, yeah, that's happening here.
You start to tell.
You start to tell.
Yeah.
And so he engaged a financial advisor, and he gave up control and basically moved his assets to us. And the client's name was Paul. And every time I hit a button on my desk, which would generate a trade in Paul's accounts, I knew that he would get the trade confirm roughly 24 hours later, and that 24 hours after that, within that 24-hour window, I would get a phone call from Paul.
Yeah.
Right? To be like, hey, Rick, like, how you doing? Like, what's going on? What are we seeing here? Because he just really enjoyed it. Like, he wanted to know what we were thinking about. And you know what? Like, I actually enjoyed those phone calls.
Yeah, we like when people are invested in what we're doing, because we find it fascinating, and it's cool when they do too, right?
Yeah. And so, like, I knew just every time, it's like, I'm pushing the rebalance button right now, and I know that within the next 48 hours, I'm going to get a phone call from Paul. And sadly, Paul passed away a couple of years ago. But if you want to be that guy, feel free. We're more than happy to take the call.
I tell a personal anecdote, and if I've told this on a previous episode, I apologize, listeners, if you're hearing this twice, but it does drive home what we're talking about. Before I was an advisor with GFG, I was a client with GFG, and Mark Green was my advisor. And I had, I was very young in my wealth building stages, and I had a very small account, let's just call it around $10,000. And you rebalance something. I didn't know what it was, and I was just trying to learn. And I asked Mark, and Mark didn't have the answer right away, so he said, well, let's just call Rick. And I'm thinking, this guy manages, $1.4 billion, and I've got an account that's got $10,000 in it. Why in the world would I get a response on this? I mean, you've got to be so busy that you've got no time to deal with this. You had an answer back in about 3 hours. And as a client, I was just over the moon about that. I mean, and it was a simple question, simple answer, but the fact that you actually go through your work life and, actually try to implement what we were just talking about, you do it great. You're wonderful.
Well, and I always this is going to sound hokey, but my mom's a client, right? And I always, when I think about our clients, I tend to think about my mom, right? Sure. It's mom. Mom was a preschool teacher for a number of years, and then she was a real estate agent. And my stepdad passed away a couple of years ago, and, she needed somebody to step in and manage the account. And, she doesn't know anything about the market, nor should she. But she has concerns and questions, and they are valid concerns and questions. There's no reason why she shouldn't have those concerns and questions answered. And so the reality of the situation is that, if you're paying someone to manage your money, you should be able to talk to that person. Sometimes you have to do things that aren't scalable. And that's one of the reasons why we have that no ivory towers rule.
Yeah, well, I love it. I know our clients love it. We hear it all the time. So, yet again, appreciate you doing what you're doing. So, for this episode, normally we have one topic and we drive it all the way through. This one I wanted to bifurcate a little bit because I wanted to introduce Rick and his background. But also, while we had him here, since he is the statistics guy, you live in this world.
I do.
I wanted to throw in a topic that we haven't quite broached yet on In the Green podcast, but so we are a company of financial advisors. Our goal is to help people invest in a way that benefits and gets them to the future that they are looking for. What are some statistics that you run across, in your day-to-day that just drive home the point of why would you even want to hire a financial advisor? Why,
Yep.
All this is out there. I've got Robinhood. I've got all this, it's the information world. I can get everything now. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't I just do this myself and save the fee?
Yeah, no, understood. And it's a very valid question. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll give you 3 reasons, right? Okay. Why? I'll give 3 reasons why. The first and foremost, and if you remember nothing else about this podcast, I would remember the following, which is people are measurably happier when they use a financial advisor versus when they don't. It is one of the most surprising statistics that's out there, but they actually do studies on sort of your overall happiness level, your confidence level, your self-esteem, just how you feel about the world. And there is a measurable impact to using a financial advisor versus not. And the thought is that it removes a lot of stress and uncertainty from your life, right? You are using a coach, you are using someone who is guiding you through the process. You typically have a plan. You know that you're going to be okay. You trust that there is someone doing this for you in a way that is better than doing it yourself. And even if you're sort of confident in your ability of doing it yourself, you know that there's someone out there that's doing it right? I sort of say hey, if you're, nobody likes attorneys until you need one. Right?
Then you love them.
And then you love them,
yeah.
Right? I got divorced and I needed an attorney. I can't imagine trying to go through that process without having one.
No.
And I think financial advisors are kind of the same way. Yes, it's possible to do this yourself. Mm-hmm. However, you will make yourself measurably happier if you engage someone to do it for you, just from I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah,
right?
Somebody who is a trained professional is keeping an eye on this.
Yes.
Right, so I can go about what I do on a daily basis.
That's exactly right.
And I know that somebody is taking care of it. I tell a story from time to time when the moment fits to introduce somebody to a financial advisory of, let's say your transmission goes out in your car, right? You might have the tools to go buy a transmission and put it in yourself, but then you're driving down the road, so they're thinking, man, did I do that? Right? I've never done this before. Did I do that properly? Versus, let's say you even take it to just a shade tree mechanic who, maybe is certified that, can do it. You're going to be more confident that the job was done properly.
That's right.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, once again, the data actually backs this up in terms of people are happier when they engage a financial advisor versus when they don't. Mm-hmm. The second piece of data out there concerns the retail performance gap. And by the way, I'll say that once again, retail performance gap. You can Google it. There are a lot of economists, economic departments that have studied this. But basically, this is the idea that when left to their own devices, people are really bad at investing. Mm-hmm. They make a lot of decisions that just aren't all that great.
Emotional decisions?
Emotional decisions. We are very emotional people. We are not rational, and the market is brutally rational. People decide that they're going to try and time the market, or they're going to try and overweight a particular stock sector, or they decide that they've figured out the way to beat the market over time. And there's some cognitive biases that in terms of behavioral investing that flow into this in terms of which outline the scope, which are sort of outside the scope of this conversation. But long story short, if you look at the data, you see about a 3 or 4% per year performance gap between people who do it themselves versus people who work with an advisor. Just so we're clear, a lot of people come in and say, I'm going to beat the market. That's why I'm using a financial advisor. And that's hogwash, right? That's not actually the goal. The goal is to actually beat the performance that you would generate yourself. And once again, Google this. The number is anywhere from 3 to 4% per year, mm-hmm. Which, if you compound over decades, is huge. It's sort of the average performance gap between people who kind of work with an advisor versus people who don't work with an advisor. And that's very important for everybody to keep in mind out there. Okay, so I'm going to be happier, I'm probably going to make more money. And then the last point around the value of the financial advisor that I will kind of leave you with is financial advisors help as you get older, making sure that you manage through the things that come about when you get older. Okay? So, I'll give you a couple of examples.
Please.
Right? First is, I can't tell you the number of widows that we deal with who husband managed the money, managed the finances for years, and don't worry about it, sweetie, I will take care of all of it.
Yeah, very common.
And then the husband passes away, and the surviving spouse has no idea what is going on, right? And the reality is that women live longer than men. In fact, 90%, I believe, is the statistic of women will wind up controlling the household finances at some point during their lives, right? Women live longer than men, and men tend to marry women who are younger than they are. So when you put those facts together, you wind up with, wow, most wives outlive their husbands. And I will just tell you, it's tragic when that spouse is not prepared. Because all of a sudden they play the game, which we, with a little bit of gallows humor, will call mailbox roulette. Right? Every day I go to the mailbox and I open it up and I have no idea what is about to appear in that mailbox. Is it a bill? Is it a statement for a financial account I don't know about? Is it a credit card that I didn't know we had? Some type of loan,
hopefully
an insurance policy? Maybe it's a check. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that all of that is happening at the same time that spouse just lost the most important person in their lives. So from an emotional standpoint, there's the uncertainty of like, oh my God, like I don't know how any of this works. But then there's also, that is happening at the point in time when that individual is least capable emotionally of dealing with it. So like, it's one of these things where a financial advisor can help bridge that gap between couples, right? Mm-hmm. Of like, hey, like I know that there's one individual here who has control of the entire picture. And so when spouse passes away, I don't actually have to worry about how this stuff is going to go down because that's been accounted for. The second thing that tends to happen as we get older is something called cognitive decline. And the thing about cognitive decline is the rates are very misunderstood. Okay? So, 1 in 9 individuals in the United States suffers some form of measurable cognitive decline. And you're like, oh, okay, 11% chance. Like, I'm going to play the odds, 80% chance this won't happen to me.
Yeah.
But that statistic is flawed, and here's why it's flawed. It looks at the total population. Once you start to break that down by age cohorts, when you start to get into your 70s and 80s, the rate of cognitive decline shoots up dramatically.
It just accelerates.
Right, so like by the time you're over age 85, you are more likely than not to have some form of cognitive decline. Over 50% of that of the population at that point has measurable impairment of decision-making abilities. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, the only thing that I would say to you guys is you need to have someone in place that can be your trusted financial advisor, that can make those financial decisions for you or help you make those financial decisions. And you need to put it in place, you need to put that individual in place before the cognitive decline starts.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're in your 50s or you're in your 60s and you're like, hey, I've been doing this myself for years, right? And I'm totally prepared to like do it myself for years. Mm-hmm. I would strongly encourage you to consider, okay, what if you're not around? Either because you sadly passed away or because you're not around because your brain has started to deteriorate a little bit. In both of those cases, you need someone to take that over for you. Mm-hmm. So to just summarize really quickly, people who use financial advisors, they're happier, they tend to make more money, and they protected both themselves and their loved ones from what will eventually happen to them with almost surety as they age.
Well, thank you for helping, disseminate some positive information out there. We know how good of a job that we can do in helping someone in their world. And what I always say is, find somebody that you like, you can trust, and that's going to provide you with decent performance, right? Look for those, but the first two are the most important. You got to like them and you got to trust them. So
that's exactly right. Well, Ryan, thank you for having me out. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to our episode today. Make sure to like, share, and download our episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate a review. Hope to see you in the 19th hole. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized finance advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analysis of GFG Wealth Advisors. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, or their clients or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by GFG Wealth Advisors or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory services are offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, GFG Wealth Advisors, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities.
Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.